for anybody that needs the replays, and then we are going to go on the Facebook. Leona, you let me know.
Yeah, will do.
Can anybody hear the background birds? Is it well annoying? Are we all right? Okay, the birds are well noisy. As is my husband who's outside. So we see we are going to share to the group, and now we're going to go live. Brilliant, Leona. You let me know, Leona, when we're there. Brilliant. Okay, so welcome. This is our last night. Can you imagine? Seems to have gone in a flash. Although I'm feeling the tiredness of it today, I have to say. I felt the kind of heaviness. Is anybody else feeling the tiredness of the information? Or are you all right with it? You okay? All right, Paula? All right, Sid? All right. Anybody processing it during the day? Moving through it, seeing it in class? Aye. And that's normally the rule of thumb on these summits. And I was aware last night that I'd asked you to do a good bit of work on yourselves. So I was thinking that you might have had you might have had a wee bit of difficulty during the week. Okay. So let me share. Brilliant, Leona, thank you. Let me share screen. I think that's the first thing we'll do. What do we see? So when you see this, will you let me know that you can see it? That will be brilliant. Okay. Everybody see that, all right? That's the model. So given that we were on our last evening, and this is our last evening together, I wanted to kind of come back to the intention that was set 3 nights ago, which was to demystify anxiety and to kind of try and help you have a framework, an effective framework for treating anxiety. That was the intention. The intention was to educate and to inform and to share our research and our practices. And our intention was to invite people to train at a deeper level with us. So I am hoping that I have ticked yes to all intentions by the end of this evening. So, you know, even if you're not thinking of joining us, I still want the intention at the end of this to be, you have a lot more information about it. You're going to put some of that information into practice, and that you'll stay with us, and you'll follow us on Facebook, and you'll follow us where we're giving you free information and all of that stuff, and that we can support your practice as best we can. So that's wholeheartedly the intention of this summit. So let me recap a wee bit, and let me see if you've any questions, and put it in the chat. I'll keep a wee eye in the chat here. Let us recap. We talked a lot about the therapeutic exchange, or the triggers, or the presenting issues that the client comes with. And a lot of our clients come with presenting issues. Either they want to manage it or they want to heal it, and they come with immediate presenting issues or root cause presenting issues. The reality of it is most clients come with root cause presenting issues. Is everybody happy enough for that at this stage? That there is something a lot deeper than what is being presented. But the question is whether the client is in intention with going that deep, and whether the client can go that deep. And the only way that we can assess that is to assess their metacognition, to assess their psychosomatic unity, to assess their introspection, to assess their way of presenting, their level of process when they come in. Is everybody happy enough with why we led with that as our first piece of information? Because if you're not assessing there, guys, if you're not looking at that, then you're not really doing the scope of work. You're just being led by the therapeutic exchange. Does that make sense? If you're not assessing where your clients are showing up, if you're not assessing how they're presenting, you're just being led by the stories that the client brings. And that is a fruitless exercise in the main. As much as the therapeutic relational depth will help, some of us don't have the time frames just to allow relational depth to take its toll. And some of us are working in short time frames. Some of us are working against the clock. Some of us are working, if we're in private practice, against the client's financial ability. So the reason that we led with that, and the reason that I led with that, is because I think that makes the biggest difference in terms of effective treatment. You're assessing whether or not your client has got the capacity to dig deep. And when I say dig deep, I mean deepen and do root cause. Because if they don't have the capacity, then that's the scope of work. The scope of work is to build the capacity in line with the client's intention, to build up the necessary skill in the client and the necessary practice in the client in order to move them through treatment effectively. And so that's why we led with day one with understanding these principles. And hopefully that's as clear as anybody. Any questions about that? Does that feel clear and concise? So we led on day one with this assessment of the client's presentation in order to be able to assess the scope of work of what needs done. The reality, as we saw, is that most clients are presenting with very low levels or very low stages of process, low levels of introspection. So just even from your own feedback and the feedback that we get from our own therapeutic, our clients who are trained in this, is that it's very rare that we get somebody who shows up knowing root cause. It's very rare we get somebody, it's not impossible. And it's certain, my work tells me I get a lot of therapists. I get a lot of therapists that come my way. And a lot of them are ready for this because they have done the training, because they've been around the block, because they have been in therapeutic process for a lifetime, because they know what's happening in their body, because they've good levels of self-awareness, because they've good stages of process. But the reality for most of the clients that are presenting, and especially when you're working with heavily traumatized clients, is that they have that assessment it will be your first port of call in your scope of work. Happy enough for that, everybody? Aye, just give me a wee nod. Good, okay. And nobody's any questions, I'm watching the chat. The second thing that we talked about, we talked about it briefly, I know, was the threat system. For me, this is absolutely fundamental. I have seen many conversations, many reels, many pieces of understanding, pieces of training around the threat system. And what I have seen that the awareness being brought on is the autonomic nervous system. What I have seen the awareness and the attention from a trauma-informed threat system is the biology and the physiology of trauma. And so I wanted to introduce another element to the threat system, that when you understand, it changes the game, it completely changes the game. And that other end of the threat system is the way the mind functions around the threat. And the way that the mind functions around the threat, if we don't understand that, then we can be caught in the web of storytelling for a lifetime. Because if we don't understand how the threat system works, we understand the physiology, we understand the biology, we understand the science perfectly, it's well taught, it's well understood. But if we don't understand how the mind functions with the threat, then what happens is we then discredit the client's threat system. We discredit, we try to rationalize, we try to help the client deactivate the threat system, if you like. So if you like, we try to do that, and what happens is the client doesn't discredit you, they discredit themselves. And I've seen that happen so many times. So then day two was really important, understanding the way the mind functions and understanding how we do not treat the mind's functions of the threat system. Because if you treat that, you are going to get caught in the mire. That we aim to deepen and underneath what the mind is presenting. But we know from our scope of work, we know from our assessment whether the client is available to deepen. And if the client is not available to deepen, then we go to day three. And day three was here. Symptoms. Now, inside symptoms, I brought a new understanding, a new paradigm of how we could, yes, take all of the regulation tools that we know are there, but add something different to it. Add this idea of sovereignty, add this idea of agency. And this practice in of itself actually creates sovereignty and agency. This practice of maps and patterns actually helps the client up the levels of process, helps the client with their levels of introspection and metacognition. And so what happens is when we do that, this really important work, we end up with tolerance. We end up with tolerance of the body. We end up with tolerance of the story. We end up with tolerance of the therapeutic exchange, and the client is then able to deepen. Then they're able to work in root cause. So that is the principles coming together. And we talked very clearly about how clients may not root back on the root cause. They may not come on the root cause at all. They may just stay here until there's a shelf, what we call, a shelf of awareness, and then may come back again another time. But that's completely the client's prerogative. So today, what we're talking about is, if in an ideal world, you've been working with your client, you've done your scope of work, you've done all your integration, you've done your psychosomatic unity work, you've done all of the integration work, you've done all of the body work, you've done all of that, and you've created this tolerance. You've built relational depth. You're not playing in story, you're not playing on the functions of the mind. The client is then automatically ready to deepen. But the client is automatically ready to deepen. Fidelma talked about that last night. There's a willingness to go beyond. There's a safety to go beyond. They lead the process. You're not pulling. But you still need to be able, which is day 4, you still need to be able to navigate that journey towards root cause. And that's where we are today. You still need the skill, you still need the protocols, you still need the what are they called? We'll call them skills today. So you still need that capacity, both in your client and yourself, to literally fall under root cause where there is capacity, where there is tolerance for it. Everybody following that? Anybody, any questions? I write myself notes, and then I forget about the notes. Now when I go back, you look at where I am, and I'm completely and utterly lost about where I am. So I just have to kind of shoot from the hip. So here's where we are. So what we're now going to do is we're going to deepen. And what I want to talk, when I'm talking about deepening, right? Deepening from therapeutic exchange to deepening under root cause, I want to clearly state that it's nearly impossible to do this from this triggers, from these therapeutic exchange, from presenting issues. It's nearly impossible, which is what most of us are taught, just to move from here to here. You do a bit of body work, but just to move directly here. It's nearly impossible without all the previous checks. It's nearly impossible without all the previous work. And so that's what if you take away nothing, hopefully you've taken that away today. So the steps that allow deepening. Okay, and this is where we begin tonight. The steps that allow deepening. We have to understand, and we're coming back to the threat system, right? You have to understand what we are deepening to. So in your mind's eye now, have a think about your client. Have a think about your client when you're asking them to deepen beyond that is being brought. If we're not attending to the functions of the mind, the functions of the threat system, if we're not trying to placate or pacify, or if we're not trying to rationalize them or get them to stop, then we're deepening. Then we're asking the deeper questions. We're asking about where the client remembers this. We're asking where the client knows this from. Like we're asking, which is, if you haven't done the body work, those questions will never work. That type of moving the client down. The client will reach a shelf of awareness and they'll bottom out. But where are we deepening to? Think about your own clients. Where are you deepening to? Where is the destination? What in your mind are you hoping that your client will be able to uncover? Because this is absolutely vital. You have to know where you're going, and you have to know if you've got there. Do you know if you're a cause? Does that make sense? And so that's what I want to talk about today. What are we deepening into? And the one thing that I want you to keep in your mind tonight is you are deepening to what cannot be tolerated. You are deepening to what cannot be tolerated. Now, there is a continuum of what cannot be tolerated. What cannot be tolerated can be resisted at one end of the continuum. It's a resistance to, and not allowing, and not wanting, and not liking, and not wanting to have. And that will activate the nervous system. But it is likely only to activate the nervous system to a certain point. Will not liking, not wanting, not wanting to have it bring the client outside the window of tolerance? Maybe, maybe not. But it's likely only to bring them slightly. Think about the things that you cannot tolerate. Think about the things that you don't like. Confrontation. Yeah, people that are cheeky, people that are aggressive, anger, whatever it is. I'm just trying to put you in the place of remembering what you can't tolerate. What does your nervous system do in that non-toleration? Does it get activated? Does it rise and fall quite quickly? So in the understanding of what cannot be tolerated, at one side, there's this resistance to, not liking, not wanting, that's activating in of itself. And then we know from the clients we're working with, if they were all that easy, we'd be laughing, but they're not, and we're not. Because at the other end of the spectrum, that will kill me. That's how intolerable it is. That will destroy me. That is an existential crisis. That I cannot live from, live with. That I will not recover from. And anywhere in anybody's nervous system activation journey, in any client's nervous system activation healing journey, you will have clients within that spectrum of what cannot be tolerated. And for the main, it will not be visible to you, and it will not be visible to them. It'll be brought through story. Does that make sense? So think about your clients along that continuum. And here's what I want you to think about. Every time somebody sits in front of you and they're talking and they're telling stories and they're telling about people and they're telling about places and they're telling about things and they're telling about what's happening, if they've good levels of awareness, they're telling what's happening within them. You constantly should be asking the question. Tattoo it on your hand, not joking, write it on your hand so you remember it when you go on to any therapeutic exchange where a client has anxiety, or write it on your hand. I wonder what cannot be tolerated. I wonder what cannot be tolerated. I wonder what cannot be tolerated. Because that becomes the foundation for every question. That becomes the foundation for every exchange once the client is ready to deepen. That becomes the meandering, that becomes the journey that the both of you take, the meandering journey towards what cannot be tolerated. Can everybody see the importance of that question? Yeah? Sorry, Susan, I'm only seeing your question now. Do you use specific tools to access clients? Yes, there's a plethora of tools that are needed. Some of them you already have, and that I'm hoping that you're connecting to them. But we'll talk about the specific tools that I use in a wee later. So can everybody see the importance of that question? What cannot be tolerated? It's a really, it's a really broad question. It's a really kind of understanding the human condition question. I wonder what cannot be tolerated here. I wonder what the client is speaking to. I wonder what the client is pointing to. Now, here is the next thing, right? That I want you to understand, that most of what the client is afraid of is internal. So what cannot be tolerated internally? So when the client is talking about the external, you're asking what cannot be tolerated internally in that story, in that person, in that place. What is happening internally? So there's these two. How do we get to root cause? I'm showing you, literally walking you down the framework of root cause. What cannot be tolerated here? Let me listen for that. What cannot be tolerated internally? If you stay on the external, you'll never understand what will happen internally. And you'll never be able to bring the client to the understanding of what's happening internally. Does that make sense? And you see why all the body work is so important, because of that body, that introspection work, that interoception work, that metacognition work isn't done. Client can't articulate what is intolerable. All they can articulate is the story that's in front of them, because they've no access to the body, they've no access to what's intolerable internally. And if we are treating people with external solutions, external problems, then we're sticking plasters on what will be coming down the line at a bigger level. So what cannot be tolerated and what cannot be tolerated internally will open up a world of possibilities within you and within the client. And now we're starting to see why. And I know you are rolling your eyes, and if you're watching this in the replay, you're going, oh, sweet Lord and Almighty. Back to the body work, back to the sovereign, back to the levels of metacognition, back there, because without that, this work is staccato. It's stopping, it's starting, it's up, it's down, it's DNAs, it's not coming in, it's been, feel like they're being pushed too far too fast, going back on medication, you know, you going and using all the resourcing tools, and maybe those resourcing tools aren't healthy or maladaptive. It's this push and pull, because what cannot be tolerated within is intolerable. You're going to get that anyway, but you're going to get that even more fiercely, because you're trying to bring the client to a place that they do not understand without all of those body-led tools, without all that integration work. Does that make sense? I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's really important. Okay, so let's have some examples. Where a client would, where the therapeutic exchange in the client, where the exchange for the client would say, you know, if what's something that cannot be tolerated. And I want you to use the chat for me, right? The loss of love cannot be tolerated. That's not deep enough. That's not deep enough to understand. We understand nothing at that. If we're talking about deepening the root cause, what do we understand in that cannot be tolerated? What does that mean? What does the loss of love mean? So I want you to give me in the chat, if you would, what you believe the loss of love would mean internally. And let's see, and be as honest as you can. Give me in the chat what you think is intolerable about the loss of love internally. And by the way, it's not beer, it's bracha, just death, Emer. Isolation, Susan. Being alone, Lucy. Right, abandonment. Okay, now, lost. I'm going to just use these ones that we've got. Okay, losing myself in a pain pull. Now, there are some people who have trained with me, and I can see their answers are part of that training. So I'm not going to read your answers out because you know too much, right? So let's start. Being alone. What is intolerable about being alone, Lucy? Yes. What is the internal? Being alone is not enough. What is it? What's the sensations in being alone? What happens in being alone? What happens internally? What do I believe will happen in my aloneness? Yeah. Because I don't love myself. And now we're deepening and now we're moving. Yes, I understand, Lucy. Yeah, absolutely. What's the problem with vulnerability? Now we're moving because I can't breathe in it, because I can't be in it, because I think I'm losing myself. Armandy, well done. And Emer, I mean, absolutely, because I fear I might die. Now we're in what's not tolerable. Is everybody seeing the nuances in that? Do you see the frame in that? What is not tolerable and what is not just what is not tolerable, but what's the internal frame of reference and what's not tolerable and why it's not tolerable? Now you've got some fruit at risk. Brilliant. Now, and what I'm going to add to that is, and some of the guys here know this, right? What I'm going to add to that is the human condition will warn the threat system in, it's not even nanoseconds, it's like shorter than nanoseconds. The human condition will warn the threat system if it thinks death is there or possible, the loss of self is possible. Is everybody with me? So these are what we call core threats. In our training is what we call core threats. If the system, if the condition believes that any of this emotional content or any of this re-experiencing of what cannot be tolerated will bring them to death, will bring them to the loss of self, will bring them to the loss of their mind, will bring them to continuous pain. Armandy, brilliant, will bring me to this pool of pain. There it is, right away, right there. Think about your clients. Will bring me to a life not worth living, will bring me to a source of pain that I cannot cope with, I cannot live with. Then that threat system is going to push them outside their window of tolerance in seconds. It's going to show up in the nervous system in a way that is probably panic, disassociation, right up outside that client's window of tolerance. And what happens? The messages in the body get fed back into the threat system and told you are going to die, you are going to lose your mind, you are going to go crazy, you are, and that's the loop that the client gets themselves under. Does that make sense? And now we're down in root cause. Vulnerability, what's inside vulnerability? Risk is inside vulnerability. What does it mean? What is risk? Is it risk? Is it these feelings will overwhelm me, that these feelings are too much for me? And what we're also remembering is that most of this root cause happened at a time when we weren't adults, where we didn't have capacity to understand, we didn't have regulation, we didn't have co-regulation, we were overwhelmed, it was too much, we give so much meaning to the material that it did overwhelm the system, it did overwhelm our ability to cope. And I have seen so many clients, including myself with my own story. If you've ever watched the TED Talk, you'll see my own story. My own story is multiple aces, absolute multiple aces. I'm fed up even talking about them, that's how. So, multiple aces and an incapacity to be with the material within. And the believing that this material within me, this emotional material within me, was a form of madness. So what I had to do was keep that emotional material away. So if I was your client, I could engage you for hours about stories about aces. And this happened and that happened and he did this and they did that and this story and this memory and this. Never really touching the material within. Very safe place to be. Because the minute I would touch that material, that was intolerable. That would mean I was mad. That would mean I wouldn't recover. That would mean I would lose my life. That would mean that my nervous system would have reached its window of tolerance and now was in disassociation, full of amygdala hijack and panic. Does that make sense? And now we're in root cause. So when we're looking for what cannot be tolerated, we're always looking at these core threats, because these core threats don't have to have had happen. Somebody who's afraid of death doesn't have to be in a car accident. They don't have to have an unreal experience of near death to be afraid of death. It can be the emotional content that brings them close to feeling like they're going to die, where the fear comes from. Does that make sense? So when we understand key threats and we understand how the system operates, like the system is trying to survive and it's trying its best to actualize. And anything that thwarts that, stops that, blocks that, the nervous system will respond with an amount of power that you would not believe. And so we have this layering effect. It's not just the key threats, which are the past, which are the old traumas that activate the body. It's not just that and root cause. There's a deeper well of information that the neuroception and the interoception is using against itself. And we're starting to understand it here. So can we see what cannot be tolerated? Can we see how, and I'll say this, can you see how a client will come in and they would have a story of the boss, and they would have a regurgitation of the boss being a bad boss and the boss out to get them. And the stories that you're hearing don't really signify the reality that this boss is an absolute nightmare. Yeah, but you know there's no point playing. You know there's no point playing in the functions of a threat. You know there's no point. So you do the body work and you deepen. And this client, in your mind's eye, is showing up with disassociation for a boss that's not that bad. What do you know what's happening? What do you know that's underneath? So if we have disassociation, what we understand is there's something life-threatening in this client's frame of reference. They have identified the boss, but we're starting to see it's not the boss. There's something deeper here. We know it's life-threatening because it's activating their dorsal vagal nerve. We know they're shutting down. So there's something here that doesn't meet the story. How many clients have you had where their physical symptoms don't meet the story of presentation? Let me know in the chat. How many clients have you had that seem like that their body is out of line with what the reality is? None? All? Many? Let me know. Yeah, 90%, lots. Absolutely, Beverly. Absolutely. And it doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. And the way it doesn't add up is because we have this, if you remember the diamond model, this big deep V. So there's a core threat and a key threat. If we go back to the boss, let's go back to the boss. This boss is threatening this client's good enoughness. Everybody with me? I could talk to that client till they're blue in the face about reminding them how great they are and believing in themselves and having confidence, and that'll not do nothing for her disassociation. What is it that is intolerable in her good enoughness? What is it, if we use the questions, what is it that is intolerable in her good enoughness, not good enoughness? What is the internal experience of not good enoughness? What is the key and core threats that might be available here that is not available to the client's awareness yet? What might I be working with? So in this example, we're working with a client just randomly who grew up in an alcoholic family and held a key responsibility for holding the family together, and had to be good enough, had to feel good enough, because if she didn't feel good enough, she felt like the world was about to crumble underneath her. We're seeing within that the key and core threats. We're seeing within that what cannot be tolerated. And so when we're working in root cause, we understand that there is often a body of work available to work with, and it is denoted by the type of threat in the body. If you're working with someone, and I'm just going to show you this. Oh, where's my wee graphic? Now, okay. I promised you that I wouldn't teach you the suck egg, that I wouldn't show you the autonomic nervous system, but here we are, right? And we're here because if we have got a client in either state of hypo or hyperarousal, even just here, disassociation, you haven't collapsed, but they're in disassociation, they're close to it, they're outside their window of tolerance, or the other end, they're in hyperarousal. If we've got a client who is here in any form or fashion, or here, what do we know? We absolutely know that there is something life-threateningly intolerable in their frame of reference, despite the story, despite the identifications, despite what is being produced. And our job is to close that gap between the story and what is intolerable. Now, if we haven't done the body work, if we haven't done the sovereignty work, if we haven't done the agency work, if we don't have our regulation tools, and Susan, you were asking about tools, we don't have all of those tools at hand, then this client is going nowhere near this. Because the experience of this to the human condition is a core and key threat itself. So this is what you're fighting against. Does that make sense to everybody? So I want you to understand, the minute a client comes in and will tell you you've disassociation, you know that there is something incredibly threatening. There is something in their frame of reference that is life-threatening, and it doesn't have to be real. It's always internal. So it can be, especially domestic violence, sexual abuse, it can be absolutely real and still living with this level of abuse. Absolutely, that activation is going to happen. But for a lot of clients, they're still living with the aftermath of abuse, long after the abuse is left, because it's the internalization of it. Okay, does that make sense to you? Anybody, any questions? So just to recap, in root cause, we are deepening from what is presented to what is intolerable. That is entirely up to the client to deepen to that place, but we will know what is intolerable. We will know what we're working with, because the body will never lie. The story, the mind will tell stories, but the body will give you it on a plate. There is a key or core threat here that is intolerable. The body will never lie to you. The mind might, and you're going to close the gap between what is presented and what is within. Does that make sense to everybody? So, key and core threats. What is intolerable? What is internal? And what is the gap? And how, using your own modalities, how do I make my way there? Now, this will not be, I'm just going to show you our deepening protocol. So we have a deepening protocol within the model. And we understand as a deepening protocol that we can get, you don't go from the 13th floor to ground zero overnight. You just don't do that. But what you do is you go from one understanding to the next, to the next, to the next, and you end up titrating your way into root cause very gently, very carefully, because you don't want to pull anybody down there too quickly. You're aware and you're holding in your own awareness the key and core threats. Client is out of their awareness, and you're just gently bringing them down and regulating them. Let me show you. Let me show you our. So you start where the client starts, and possibly you might psychoeducate here. We call them shelves of awareness. And you understand that the client isn't just going to jump from where they present right down and the deepening, that there's going to be more knowledge, more awareness, more body-led work, more understanding of what is within. And that the client can move up and down those shelves of awareness. One week they can come in and they seem like they're in shelf 2, and the next week they come back and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was, who? What story was it? No, not today. And they're back up on the shelf. So we understand that this deepening protocol helps the client move between and titrate and pendulate between each shelf of awareness as we hold the idea, as we hold the concept of the key and core threats that are intolerable inside the client's frame of reference. Does that help? So that's how we get from there to there. Now, I want you all to imagine something for a wee minute. So the thing, before I do that, just want to really recap. What is the core threat? What is the key threat? What is presented? What's the gap between? What is intolerable? And what is the body telling us about what is unseen? What is the body telling you about what the client cannot see? Because the body has more information. So if you hold that in your mind, that'll be brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, when we get under there, the other protocol is undoing, but you have to get there before you can't undo, and you have to know what you're undoing. Once you undo root cause, what happens is magical. Not only are they free from the pain of the past, which is wonderful, but what happens is the neuroception ceases to search. It stands down. All of the reason that the client came to therapy in the first place, this scanning, this watching, this predicting, this checking, this solving, this soothing, stops. And yet we have done nothing with it, only remove root cause. We haven't even played with it, and when the client has presented, we haven't worked with it at all. Does that make sense, Steve? So as the client presents their neuroception, as the client presents their scanning, presents their threats, presents their stories, we haven't worked at that at all. All that we've done is done the body and down under root cause. And by nature of removing root cause, it literally de-escalates the threat system completely. Now that can be discombobulating for clients because they've been living in this neuroception, they've been living in this state of high alert, they've been living in this way of being, scanning, checking. But all of those what if thoughts subside, all of the scanning thoughts subside, all of the don't do thoughts subside. And the very thing that we thought we had to sort out, that we had to speak to, that we had to tick off, that we had to regulate, that we had to intervene with, that we had to use certain protocols with, we haven't used any energy, no energy on that at all. We just worked in the body and worked in root cause. And all of the stuff that the client came to therapy with, which was the problem, dissipates when root cause is taken out. And we haven't energized ourselves around it or energized the client. All of the false associations, all the false identifications. Once root cause is taken out, There is no need for the scanning. Now that can take a while as well, which brings me on to the last piece of our puzzle. And this is, it's a whole new world, Breda, as you well know, because you've dealt with enough clients in it. A whole new world. A whole new world. And if anybody has any small children and they've been to see Ariel, the Disney show Ariel, anybody seen it? A whole new world. It's like a fish out of water. You're learning to walk. You are learning to be in this world for the first time. I know that was my experience. I've had clients say to me, I'm searching for it. I'm so used to it. I'm looking for it. Are you sure it's gone? Are you sure it's away? This is a bit impossible. I've never, and that's not hyperbole. That's the truth. And you've heard testimony to that. We've podcast testimony to that. So I don't need to beat that drum today. But what I do want to say is, and so we come back to the last principle. And this is a very important principle. It's actually so important. It's one full module. This is so important. It's one full module in our training. And let me show it to you very quickly because I'm careful of time. So let me show you. Where are we? Have a wee bit of a whole new world, that song bursting through me. What do we say? No. So there I say that the magic of this is that the threat system stands down. Stands down. But, and this is really key. This is like beyond important. You've done all of this work. Think about your client base. You've done all of this work. And just as a show of hands, who's dealing with really traumatized clients? I know Susan, you are. Mags, Armandy, Leanne, Michelle, are you dealing with a lot of trauma by any chance? Right, okay. This is a really important feature. Because yes, the nervous system stands down. And the client goes off into this new world. And they start to feel ease. And they start to feel well. And they start to feel regulated. And what happens is, in that ease, in that joy, in that wonder of life, because what happens is the world literally opens up. There is a fear that might be lost. That newfound hope, that newfound joy, that newfound presence, being present to the world, being available to the world, might go. That the products of their healing may be taken from them. So they're in this new world, but afraid that this new world might not be their forever reality, especially for clients who have experienced an absolute lot of trauma, and who have been living this way for a lifetime, who have been tortured by the threat system, who have been living in disassociation constantly or in panic constantly. And what we have seen in our evidence is those clients come back petrified. And they're not petrified of the root cause, because that's gone. They're petrified of loss of the happiness, loss of the ease. They're scanning and wondering, will I go back? Will this go away? What? And so what they're intolerant of is ever re-experiencing any of this. They're intolerant of the experience of joy being taken from them. And it's a real phenomenon. It's a real psychological phenomenon. And it is worse for clients who have been living this way for a lifetime. And we build it under the plan, we build it under the treatment plans, because it is real, it happens. Does this make sense? Let me know if that makes sense. Yes, it's scary, an unknown place, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, Leslie Ann, of course there's deeper, I know. Does that make sense? And do you see the importance of that? And many of you might have experienced that yourselves. I know I did. I know as I continue to grow and develop and heal, and then I'm continually kind of stretching my tolerance. Yes, absolutely, Susan. They have a new identity that feels familiar, and they don't want this newfound energy to go. And what can happen, and that's okay. What's brilliant about that is that that's not a whole process over again. That's a affirming place. That's a staying with a client in our new reality, acceptance. That's a lovely place to work with a client. It's difficult and it happens. And sometimes it happens 6 months out, or something switches on, or they get a somatic crossover and they think it's all back again. And they don't want it to be back, and they don't want to be back in those places. And it's real. So I want you to be very careful of that as well. Even if you've done amazing work with clients and you haven't done root cause, or you might get that back. And have anybody seen that in their clients and not recognize what it was? Anybody got a client to any level of regulation and then they're back and frightened? Because it's a real psychological phenomenon. How does that feel to you? And here we are. Let me know if I have the wee chat up, so if you have any questions, let me know. And here we are, the 4 effective principles plus A and B of anxiety treatment. And what's really important about these is that you can chunk this down. You can chunk this down. This does not have to be a one process. Depending on your level of clients, depending on how many you're working with, depending on where they're coming from, depending on what stage of process they're coming in at, you can chunk this down. For example, if a client arrives here and they're a high stage of process and they've done therapeutic work and they're trauma informed, they will not want to do any of this work or this work because they don't need to. Yeah. So for that client, you will just do this work. You can segment the work and say, okay, this is my scope of work. I'll go from here. Once you've assessed at their beginning session that they've good levels of metacognition, you can just go straight there. You don't have to do every part of the model. And this is what we call the treatment plan. For clients who show up in a low stage of process, who are afraid of their bodies, afraid of the symptoms in their body, then we do this. We create tolerance of the symptoms, and then we go back to therapeutic exchange. And we create agency and sovereignty, and we go back to therapeutic exchange so that we can deepen. So each piece of this model has within it its own framework. But you can work with your client now that you understand the pieces in it. Yeah? Does that make sense? The client guides you subconsciously. Absolutely, the client, well said, Rita. The client absolutely does guide you subconsciously. And you know that from the practice of it. And when they're safer, they drop on and they feel better. Okay, brilliant. When you work in CAMS, Michelle, tell me, is it, because I know that Paula asked this question. We've had clients that I've had trainees who are therapeutically trained and then came and did this model, and they're working with teenagers. Now, they are not working with young children. They're working with teenagers who they can bring to a good level of awareness, they can bring to metacognition. But it's the upper end of teenagers, it's not the lower end, Paula. You know that yourself anyway. Yeah. And for me to say anything else would be remiss of me. We have had good success at the upper end. So in CAMS, Michelle, I am aware of CAMS. I'm not aware of the time or the age ranges within CAMS. So if you let me know that, 11 plus mostly. So it will be taking pieces of the model and adding it to what you're already doing for sure. Absolutely. Michelle, are you here in Derry CAMS? Are you in Northern Ireland CAMS? In Derry CAMS particularly? So yes, so that's the step-by-step process, but there's more to it than that. Belfast, Michelle. I have a husband that works with CAMS, so that's why I was asking. So there's more to it than that, and I think there's some questions there about more to it than that. There is an absolute step-by-step process that's needed. I mean, I've given you the framework in the hope that the framework will help you, in the hope that the pieces of the puzzle will help you. I mean, hopefully it does, and hopefully we're educating differently. But if you're interested, then the actual program is beyond what I've given you, obviously. So let me take you through the program itself, and then you can make up your mind as to whether or not it might be a good fit for you. So let me take you through the program, and I'll give you all the details within it. Okay. All right. So all the modules, all the protocols, all the skills, all the interventions. What do we see? So it's 7 modules in total. It's over 16 weeks. Now, in that 16 weeks, we also have additional skill program. So we do a series of theory, kind of the way that if you like the way I taught the 4 nights, the teaching's the same, theory, integration. It's taught over 16 weeks, and then we do a separate skills, because you have to learn the skills of maps and patterns, and you have to learn the skill of deepening. So we give you theory, we give you all the framework, but we also work on the skill. The modules are delivered like this, but it's much more interactive because it's a smaller cohort. There's only 20, simply because I can't manage anymore. I'm only not a one-woman team. As you've seen, there's plenty here, but I'm the one delivering it. It's taught live. So let's get into the details of it, right? The modules, understanding the threat system is your first understanding. Once you understand the science, the biology, the physiology, and the mind's functions of the threat system, then you're learning all of the theory of that, and then you're learning the protocols within that helps you psycho-educate your client and bring your client to new levels of awareness. Module 2 is the most important and would be really, really important for anybody working with disunified clients. So it's a full psychosomatic unity module. So this module you can take out and use, and it doesn't have to be done in anxiety. You can take this module out as a standalone module and help your clients no matter where they are. Now, this psychosomatic unity module it's really in depth. So it's the actual protocols that allow, and the skill, they allow a client reunification without re-traumatizing. So where you've got a lot of clients who are coming who are not reunified, this is the kind of step-by-step process of reunifying their body. Notice that work has to be done prior to the anxiety maps and patterns work. Do you see? Look at the level of safety in that program. Psychosomatic unity. I see by the time everybody gets to module 5, recalls the thing that they came for, they're all exhausted because it's been safety, 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 safety. It's been regulation. It has been coming home to the body. It has been sovereignty and agency. But I can tell you this, you see these 4 modules, will be your lifeblood, not only for this, but for any other practice you have, because they are foundational to any good practice. They're foundational to, and it's not just regulation. Look at the difference. This isn't just a regurgitation of regulation tools, although they are in there too, because you're going to need them too. You're going to need all the regulation tools. You're going to need all the dorsal vagal lateral tools. You're going to need all the groin tools that are in there too. So we do that, all of those tools inside psychosomatic unity, but we do the specific protocols for reunification without re-traumatizing. And once they're in their body, they're in their body. You can take that as standalone for your own practice. Then module 3, I have a really itchy nose for some reason, trying to itch it. Module 3 is solely on patterns, solely on the body again, solely on reading the body, solely on building introspection, solely, once we get them into the body, we have to get them used to the body. And I'll give you an example of the protocols within that. There are facets of introspection. So as facets of introspection, one of the protocols within that is to be able to get your clients, and wait for this, and you'll be able to do this yourself, to decipher, not to decipher between the multiple sensations in the body, to be able to name, locate, and regulate all of the different types of activities within the felt sense. Somatic, emotions, core woundedness, hormones, be able to tell the fluctuation difference. This is what we try to do in this. It's really detailed. So not only do they know what it is, they're able to articulate, they're able to point it out, they're able to come under that. Imagine that for your clients' words. Imagine that for your own words. Amazing. So after that, module 4, maps and patterns. So mapping. So we get into the protocols of mapping, real detailed mapping, how to map, how to extract the meaning, how to work in metacognition. So if we've all these maps and we've all these meanings, how to work in that. So the protocols for that. But not only the protocols for that, and this is where you need the skills, we put on extra skills, not only the protocols for that, for the map, but how to undo the map, how to break the rise in the body, how to take away the meaning, how to change the meaning, that's all in there. And then we spend root cause. Root cause is one module, but it takes us the longest to get through. We spend weeks in root cause and all of that, all of the protocols in that. Then the fear is that last, the fear of the fear coming back. And then module 7 for me is really important. It's the chunking down of the model, the breaking it, the assessment tools that you're going to need in order to assess your clients' levels of metacognition. It's all of that. We do that at the end. So we do have all your assessment tools, and we have all of your risk assessment tools, because you're going to need risk assessment tools as well in here in order to keep the client safe. So we have all of that in the last module. So is anybody any questions? I know I'm rambling on here. I'm trying to get through this as much as I can. Yes, Leslie, I'll share that now with you, right? Yeah, there's 3 cohorts. One in June, I'm probably going to come to that now, Emma. One in June, or one in July, starts in July, one that starts in October, and one that starts in February. So you can pick your poison. We deliver live lectures, and then we have active coaching. We've practical skills for you to implement. Now, at this, I'm going to show you how it's held, because it might be easier to show you how it's held. Can everybody see that? Did I switch that over? Did everybody see that? Did everybody see me where I am?
Yeah, you can see, Shona.
Yeah, that's your course. So it's all held, even the live lectures that are unique to you. It's all held in that digital format. And you have lifetime access to it. It doesn't go away. All of the lectures are recorded. So you see all the modules, you can see all of the Documentation, you see all of the documents, you see all of the so we have everything that we share, all of the protocols, all of the downloads is held within your teaching scope alongside all your recordings. So if you can't accommodate, say if you're on holidays and stuff, it's just there for you to watch. So you'll be able to follow the program module after module. And all of everything is downloadable so that you can print everything. All your resources are downloadable. And what we have is that we have assessments at the end of each module, and they're just case study assessments for you to listen and then fill out what's that called? Multiple choice, and that moves you through. But I move you through the modules anyway, because I'm teaching it live. This isn't a pre-recorded program, just so you know it. So there it sits like that, and everything's downloadable and nothing goes away. And the important thing for us is as we update the training, you get the newest version. So if I was to add something to that, you get the newest version of the training. So it's not like you have to pay for the newest version of the training. Everybody that gets the updated version, I don't know how many therapists we've trained now, maybe, I don't know, 300, they all get the next version of the training. So you don't need to worry about that. So let me go back. Oh, here we are. So that was that. That was better to show you than that. There's a lot of bonuses as well for anybody that has showed up to the there's a lot of bonuses. I'm not going to bore you with the bonuses. They're all there. You get access to the full library of professional money courses. I have a plethora of CPD courses that I've taught over the years. You get access to all of them, and there's 2 bonus modules. You get access to that. Now this is probably the most important one for me, right? You get supervised practice for 2 months after. So you go do the training, you go get the skill support, you work in your cohort, you come out the other end, you go practice, and you come back for 2 months so that I can supervise your practice and pick up anything that's not integrated or anything that you could do better. Is that happy enough? That's probably the most important to me. And we haven't always got that one right. And that to me ensures a good level of practice for everybody that's out there. So at the minute, we are offering 40% off all 3 cohorts, because it's just the offer that we do to try and encourage people to come and train with us. So at the minute, inside this, I think it's for about a week or a few days at least. I'm not good at this stuff, Leona will know. We are offering 40% off. You can do a 1 payment, and I'll go to that now in a minute. You go to a 1 payment, and it's the cheapest option for a 1 payment, or you can go to 4 months or 6 months payment plan. So you reduce it right down to a small fee per month and pay up for it, whatever works for you. And it's 13 hours CPD recorded. That's supervision. You also have a private peer Facebook. I'm throwing the kitchen sink at you. You want to know how much it is now. And all the bonus bundles is all there. So summarize. 16 weeks, 8 weeks of theory, 8 weeks of skill, recorded CPD points, access to the full digital library, you get all of that. Bonuses, all of that, all course documentation. And yeah, the opportunity, which is more important for me, to be part of a network of practitioners who are spreading the word. That's more important for me. That's my intention that I said that I was going to fulfill today, and hopefully we're going to fulfill that. And that's the investment. The investment is $699 and a one-off payment, and that's 40% off the normal price. And there's a bonus on that, and there's Leona's telling me when it's closed. So if that was the price, but it isn't. We've changed that price to $699 for anybody on here, and there is 4 pay and 8 pay. So you can spread this completely as much as you want. So you can, the 4 pay is only available for July, or the 1 pay, and October you can do the 4 pay or the 8 pay. So if anybody has any questions, that's the real price of it. And what we have done is that we have reduced it to that price. for this cohort today. So if anybody has any questions whatsoever, stick them in the chat. Now, while Leona's answering the questions, there's CPD cert for the completing the entire thing, of course, because there's so many hours yet. I'm just looking through the questions. Okay, I think we've answered all them, or Leona's answering those questions. So I think what's left to say is thank you for putting up with me. Thank you for listening to my impassioned plea to treat anxiety differently and to look at it from a whole new perspective. Thank you, Breda. Thanks a million. Thanks for opening your minds and your hearts up to this information. And I know that, you know, as we continue to charge forward, changing the way that this is treated and trained, that some of you are going to be on this journey. And I'll be forever grateful and delighted because I am absolutely insistent in changing the way anxiety is treated and trained, because I've seen too many benefits. We've too much information. We've too much hard, cold evidence that this is absolutely life-changing. So thanks a million for listening, and thanks for being part of this. I hope you join me on the inside. I hope to see your wee faces very soon. And please spread the word. Please, if you find this informative, please tell people about it. The more information we get out there, the better, because it's not really about me and it's not really about you. It's about the people who are suffering. So the more we can get to that, the brilliant. Thanks, Susan. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Matt. Thank you so much. Hope you see us all on the inside. There'll be loads of emails coming your direction. And one thing to say is I think we're down to 10 places for July. I think that's where we are. We've only 10 left. So if you're wanting to secure your place for July, you'll probably have to move quicker. And for those of you that are thinking about October or July, I'll see you all then. Brilliant, Leanne. I'm delighted. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to Susan, who kept me alive. Or under your, Susan, your interaction with me the whole way through this grounded and centered me, because it was like I was just talking to you the whole way through it. So thank you. And the nodding of the head and the shrugging of the shoulders, and that I was reading in between the lines, and thank you for showing up every night. Thanks to everybody that showed up. Brilliant. Thank you. October is all the same price, Susan. This is the bonus that we're putting on. So anybody that wants to join for the next 3 cohorts will get it at this price in for October as well. So it's not a change in price. It's the same price for July, October, and next year. And that's a promise to anybody that wants to join. All right, I'm done. I'm going for a swim somewhere. I'm going to find a sea to swim in. I'm finished. Thanks so much. Thanks all, guys, and I hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye, Anna. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks, Michelle. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.